I never lived really the kind of life that I ever really thought about retirement. When I was young, I never really thought that I'd be alive at this age. I never thought I'd make it out my 20s. So retirement definitely wasn't. What I'm living now, the life that I'm living, that regular life, that was a dream of mine at one time. And now I'm here. So now I made it to my 40s, and lately it has been crossing my mind. When you get older, milestones happen to be, I don't know, they just trigger thoughts a lot easier these days than they used to. I just didn't really care when I was young. But you know, my wife and I just recently celebrated our 16th anniversary. We've been together shit going 19, 20 years, something like that. And I don't know, that milestone definitely kicked up some dust for me. And and retirement was one of those things. I'll be honest, like retirement's weird, like when I think about it, because I don't really ever see myself really not doing anything. You know what I mean? And maybe you're the same way. I'm kind of making this video because I want to hear some people in the comments. I don't really like the hanging out thing. I hang out with family. That's about it. But I was kind of trying to get some thoughts here on, do you think about retirement like these days for real? If you work in a 9 to 5, I don't see it. And you know, I don't think retirement is anything that I'll ever think I'm going after. You know, I would kind of like fine tune it. Like these days I more think of the idea that would kind of blend still being able to do something and retirement. Just kind of when I think of retirement, I think of comfortable, because I don't ever think of not ever doing anything. So starting a business would be for me, I guess, what's in place of other people's thought of retirement. Because I want to be doing something that I love. You know what I'm saying? And of course, everybody has expenses. So I would want to keep that going. Plus, you have family, and when you have family, you want to be able to help. I want something completely different for me. In my 40s, I'm starting over. I look at it as starting over. And it's not starting over in the same way as when I actually started over earlier in my life. When I went from being homeless on the streets to actually having a home and a family and all that, losing everything. But now I have a family. That is just crazy to me. But it's not that kind of starting over. But having gone through that and gotten to where I am today, I know that more is possible. And that's the whole point. I'm not going to stay where I am because I believe that we were ill taught when we were young, and it's not necessarily our parents' fault or our teachers' fault. They were caught up in the system too. They were doing what they were told. They were doing what they thought they were, teaching us. They thought that what they were teaching us was the right way. And I've just come to understand for myself that it wasn't. We aren't taught to dream. We aren't taught to create and build on that. We're taught to learn a task and go jump in with a bunch of other worker ants and just, make somebody else successful. And to me, I feel like starting over these days is me saying, okay, well, I've overcome this. I know that now I can overcome this. And it really, the majority of it comes to mindset, getting from one place to the next. The majority of it is mindset because, there's not just tasks involved. There's like a completely different way of thinking and expectations, for Christ's sake. What I definitely have come to learn is that, what we do most in life, which is work, and what we have been taught to do most in life, which is work, works on a completely different framework than almost everything else in life. If you want to progress to something, there's no progression in a linear framework, and that is work. You know what I'm saying? You do this and you get this. You might be able to get raises and this and that, but in the long run, most people have to scrape by anyway, so they don't have a budget. So there's never any actual like getting ahead because you can't set anything to anything, if that makes any sense. If you don't have a budget, if you don't have enough money to actually make a budget, then you're never able to actually plan for anything. And that goes into our habits. You know what I'm saying? So like, and we are, a victim. We do the same thing. I don't even want to say victim of it. We are just, we're a player in that game. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes, when you get more money, you up what you're doing in life. And recently we had just gotten a big wake up call, you know, and maybe I'll go into that in another video. But it was just another experience in life that showed us, because you learn the most from your errors, you know. Um, but yeah, anyway, this was about retirement. But the whole point is that I want to build a business these days, and that is going to be me starting over, because I'm tired of scraping along. I have been in this long enough to where for a while I was even complacent with where I was. And I will always say, you've got to remain grateful, because complacency does a lot of things to one's mind, and if you don't stay moving, you don't stay wanting more, which I think is almost like a natural instinct, unless it's stifled out somewhere along the line. um, but it always shines through a little bit sometimes when you're sitting around with friends and stuff, and you're like, man, I want to do this or I want to do that. And I see a lot of that lately, especially like at work. Like I said, I don't do a lot of hanging out with friends, but like when I'm at work, I see that mindset, like they've settled. You know what I'm saying? And then like when somebody does actually want something, it's all talk. So you'll be saying that and they'll be saying, yeah, I want this. I'm having this thoughts of doing this, blah, blah, blah. Then they get back to work. Then a week later, a month later, they're probably having the same conversation with you. Nothing's ever been done. They're still working a regular job, going home to their wife. You know what I'm saying? Um, it's like somewhere along the line, it's like they lost that drive. But we don't have a purpose when we're working a regular job. You know what I'm saying? Our purpose is to get up and go to the job. But what is that? You know what I'm saying? It's like, and a lot of people kind of confuse, like they might be like, well, purpose. Well, yeah, I got a purpose. I get up every morning because of my family. No, your family's your why. Your family's a reason why you get up. So your family should be the reason why you want more. Most people just kind of use those things that they consider themselves grateful for, but I call it be more glad. You know what I'm saying? Most people are just glad in life that they have things, not grateful for them, because gratitude is what opens those doors to opportunity. That's what allows you to see that opportunity that's in front of you. You know, um, just being glad is kind of where, the things that one would be grateful for in life, those that are just glad for what they have, it helps them get through their day. They go to work, at least they have that which they're glad about when they get home. It kind of smooths things out for them so that they can get up and do it all over again. Being grateful, you want more, and I try to view it as, my family is my why. My 6 grandkids, are you kidding me? When I'm building this, me building my business, that is that is my purpose, and I believe that we all need a purpose. And when I think of my grandkids, that is my why. That is what's pushing me. My wife, that's what's pushing me, you know. Um, but as for retirement, that's not really something that I have in mind. It does cross my mind sometimes because, my wife has some, she's got a few years on me. She's 18, 19 years older than me. And of course, I wish that I would have woken up earlier. You know what I'm saying? And because when it comes to this YouTube thing, for instance, I would always encourage this to anybody, because it's not like you have any costs about getting started. You know what I'm saying? You can use your phone just to get started until you get things kicked off. Um, it's got the lowest barrier of entry when it comes to building a business. You aren't building a brick and mortar where you've got to put in all this money. You can just start. You know what I'm saying? Now, of course, it depends on which route you want to go, but say you didn't have anything in mind at first. You could just throw spaghetti at the wall until something sticks. Now, some people are going to advise against this, but not everybody's in the same spot. Now, if you're part of a business or you've got a product or this or that, you've already got something to kind of mold your content. But if you are just sitting there going, I don't know what to do, I would at least get started. You know what I'm saying? Because there's going to be a certain point of time where you have to get used to what you're doing in the first place. This is what has kept me from starting my business for the longest. Now, for the past 15 years, I've had my hands in numerous business models. You know what I'm saying? But it wasn't what I actually wanted to do. And some of them took me months of doing it before I realized that it really wasn't actually what I wanted to do. I'm in my 40s now and I don't care anymore. Most of my earlier videos, I only have 6 of them on this channel. This channel is going on 2 months old. And so this one's newer. You know what I'm saying? But it's so new because I've only recently finally got the gall to like flip on that camera and talk, you know. And even before I did that, it took me a few times in front of the camera to do so. If that's what it takes, do that. Start something you want to do. If you're over 40, you already have experience in this life. You don't start speaking on that, and see what sticks from there. Like, what do you enjoy? Like, talk about it. And, set yourself up for something. Maybe retirement was never in your mind, but this would be an awesome alternative. Plus, it goes back to that whole purpose thing. It gives you a purpose to wake up in the morning. And I know your family and all that. But that should be your why. Of course you wake up in the morning for them. You know what I'm saying? But that's what should push you to want more than what you're scraping by now. And sometimes we just forget. We get in tunnel vision. I mean, it's been so long that many of us have been working that we just kind of, we're playing it safe. We were always taught to play it safe. Unless you grew up in a household of people that were business owners, that taught their kids the business. You know what I'm saying? Like, typically that's how it is. Unless there's somebody that kind of steps outside themselves, like me, for instance. I wasn't raised up in that, but me going through what I went through before, me not being satisfied with where I'm at now, that even though this was at one time success for me, this was a dream for me. I we're not meant to sit still, you know. And it's a shame that I've been thinking about this. It's a shame that in 2026 that we aren't pushing this on our children more these days. School isn't set up like that. It's still telling us to go get a job. That whole like believing in yourself and dreaming and all that shit's just out the window. They say it in like passing. You know what I'm saying? It's like not ethical to say that kind of crap out loud, but overall, the way they teach, that's exactly what it is. They're not teaching us to dream. They're not teaching us to, you know what I'm saying? Not when we're young. And I encourage anybody over 40. I encourage anybody younger too. Don't get me wrong. It's just over 40 crowds my crew. You know, we're over that whole. There's a secret to making all this work. There's work when it comes to anything worth doing. But you got to believe in yourself, man, and get unstuck. Get unstuck. And like I said before, this was to kind of I wanted to hear some people's comments, about retirement if you're in your 40s, because when you're in your 40s, it's a weird age. I'm not going to lie, because it's kind of like you're too young to be old, but too old to be young. Does that make any sense? It's like if you were to go to the younger crowd, you know what I'm saying? They'd be like, out. And if you sit there and complain about your aches and pains that are starting to come because you are getting older, and you start saying something like, "Oh man, I feel old," someone older than you is going to tell you, "Man, you better, man, you don't know what old is." I know I ain't the only one. And if you're older and all you're doing is working a job that the only thing you have to be grateful for is the things outside of your job. Like, shit, you spend most of the time at your job. You know what I'm saying? It's like, why be unhappy? But it is going to take a lot more work. It's going to take a lot more work. Like I said, I've had my hands in new over the past 15 years. I just got complacent, so I got comfortable, and I wasn't putting the urgency behind it that I was. You know, I really had to get tired. I really had to be tired to get in front of that camera and let me know that this is what I'm going to do. Just don't, try to find that. Try to instigate you getting tired. Are you, look around. What are you not happy with right now? Are you not happy with your job? Man, make it to when, your boss pisses you off or something like that, man. Try to drive yourself to that just getting tired moment where you record yourself. I'm going to tell you what got me comfortable with talking to the camera. First time, not all that long ago, I walked out of my job, and that day I talked to the camera. Now, granted, I didn't put it out. You know what I'm saying? But from there, I kept flipping on the camera. Anytime I felt like I needed to say something about the day, had to get something off my chest, I would talk to the camera. Did that about 4 or 5 times, and then I turned the camera on me and I shot, and I put out my first video. So, if it's been on your mind to start a YouTube channel, just go ahead and do it. Start something. Throw some spaghetti at the wall if you have to. If not, there's more than likely that you are interested in something, you know, and there's no doubt that you have experience under your belt. So talk, you know what I'm saying? Those young cats, they might have more time under their belt, but they ain't got the experience. You do. You have life experience, and these days is the time to actually do it because, with all this AI junk and everything, people want that human connection. You know what I'm saying? And right now is the time. And over 40 is good. Once you get it to over 50 and over 60, your lane's kind of clear, man. You still have a good runway because these sitting talking head videos, they are, and the ones with little editing, they are really becoming more popular. So you don't have to learn a lot of editing, and it probably take you about 5 minutes to learn what you have to learn to cut out the beginning when you turn on your camera and the end when you turn it off, So I don't know. Again, let me know what your thoughts are. If you're in your 40s, let me know what your thoughts. Shit, if you're in your 50s and 60s, let me know because I don't really know much about retirement. You know what I mean? Where are you along with your journey? What do you feel about? Has it been a thought in your mind? Because these days, I'm sure a lot of people, the way prices are and everything, like I'm thinking, and the world's different these days than it was when I was young. So retirement's less and less like an option. So let me know what your thoughts are about retirement. Shit, even if you're younger, let me know. Have you thought about that? Man, get on it. Start building your business now. I encourage that. But anyway, anybody, start building something for yourself.